2021 saw the release of the remake for Wrong Turn, a film that I didn't really fancy going to see, to be honest, especially after the rather mixed reception, or one might say poor reception even. I didn't see many great reviews for this film, so given the reputation it had and what my thoughts were at the time of the original, before the recent rewatch, I was just like, yeah, no thanks. But then obviously 31 on 31 came up and destroyed my life. And yeah, I had to watch it. So I did. And it turns out it's actually quite interesting. Gotta be said. Now, you know me, if you watch my channel regularly, you know I like story, I like themes, I like characters, and I feel like this film does arguably the best job in the series of kind of coalescing all those things into a plot. Now, whether it's better than the original remains to be seen. I think maybe a couple of rewatches. One of my problems with remakes is that they take classics, films that are already outstanding, and they remake them and they make them worse. They don't change a right lot about it. They just kind of take the soul out of it. Now, thankfully, Wrong Turn doesn't have the it's not in the position of being an absolute classic 5-star film. So it doesn't matter if you change things or whatever, but they do. They change things here. They take the plot in a different direction in a way that kind of dissects modern society, traditionalism, through the context of this cult. That, so like with the first film, it was inbreds. They just kill people, ate them. Here, it's like a cult of people that basically live the old way. They live how they did way back when. A group of people kind of separate themselves from local town, went to live in the woods, and carried on with their old traditions. Now, when these modern day people go bumbling into their environment, into this cult's environment, they start getting picked off. And they get into a lot of trouble. And instantly you're like, oh, right, yeah, okay, these nasty people are just going to do away with them, like the original film. But then there's a bit of a turn in it where some characters have to make a decision. And I find it really interesting because there's a whole thing that's opened up with regards to cultures. And I'm not saying it's right or even wrong or anything like that, but the fact of the matter is these people wander into a culture that they are not familiar with. And as a result, they make bad choices. They make choices based on their perception of things rather than the reality of things. And I feel like that's a really good lesson for the modern world, because I feel like people do that a lot. We make judgments because of cultural things that we, quite frankly, do not understand, because we're not part of that culture, and we have no right to kind of judge. And don't get me wrong, I know what you're saying. It's like, yeah, but Brian, this is a cult of people who kill people and trap them in an underground dungeon and all that. I get that. I'm not justifying that. I'm not saying that's right. But I do think the film does a good job of dealing with that notion, which is that often you get tourists going abroad, going into a culture, getting into strife, getting into bother, being imprisoned, and it's because they went blindly into that culture thinking they could take their Western ideals, their Western ways of thinking and doing things, and it backfires because they didn't do their research. So I liked that angle. I really loved that angle, actually. The fact that there's a death that takes place where you're like, oh, it's the inbreds up to their tricks, like with the originals, and then as it develops, you realise, well, you call it into question. You're like, well, what? Was that intentional? Was that murder? Or was that down to a misunderstanding of cultures? And so I liked that. I really do. I thought that was a thing worth exploring, and I think it explores it reasonably well in the questions that it raises. For the most part, I like the main characters. I feel for the struggle that they're in. I feel like the struggle they're in is somewhat different to the struggle that the original characters were in, where, you know, they have crossed some boundaries, both morally and just out of sheer stupidity. And yeah, seeing how they're going to deal with those is intriguing, and it keeps me invested in the movie. It's more complex, more complicated than I would have imagined, given the reputation it's garnered in such a short space of time. I mean, it's got like a 2.5 on Letterboxd. That's not exactly high praise. So yeah, as with the original film, I was surprised. Is it a classic of the horror genre? No, not by a long shot. Would I be up for seeing a sequel? Yeah, I'd watch it. You know, if they made a sequel, I'd watch it. Not a classic, but decent enough, well worth a watch. If you've seen Wrong Turn, the remake, 2021 version, then let me know what you thought about it down in the comments section. Thank you for watching this video, and until next time, cracking.